G'day, this is my man Dan from Nascent, and I'm out here with Lee, and we're out at Dan's pad. That's his WRX in the background. We thought it'd make a cool set, and we're tracking a demo. Perhaps it might end up being a track. Actually, pretty happy the way that this garage has kind of been sounding. You want to hold that for us, Lee?
Yeah.
So, if anyone else follows me, you know I probably record most of my own stuff, and particularly live drums. So I thought I might just quickly run through how I'm approaching Daniel and recording this track. So I'm a big fan of capturing a natural drum sound, and I suppose I'll go through the microphones as I see most relevant to least relevant. Starting with the overheads. Up here we've got an A-B pair, and they're both nude microphones, small diaphragm condensers. We're out in the middle of nowhere. That's actually a tractor going past. You might hear it in a minute. That's why we're having a bit of a break in between takes. So I went for an A-B pattern. I do like an XY pattern for people that are a bit nerdy about recording, but Dan's kit's quite wide set up, and we've got a rack. I didn't have the right stance to kind of do an XY approach, so I've got an A-B pair, and basically you go for a centre access of the kick and the snare. So if you think about a recording, the snare drum's typically in the middle, and is the bass drum of the stereo field. And obviously, if you look at the drum kit, it's not like that. The snare is over to the left, so you have to blend your overhead mics in a way that's going to create that image on record. So it's funny. A lot of people may think that the close microphones on the drums are really important, but 90% of your sound is coming from these overheads. That's really important to get right. And probably what gives the recording life, and particularly the way I approach recording drums, is trying to capture the natural reverb. So I'm using a pair of ribbon microphones here. So that's a very old traditional style of microphone. They're from Nude as well. That's their rectangular ribbon mic, and they have two, and they capture from both sides, or what's known as figure eight. And this particular mic configuration is called Blumlein. Blumlein was an engineer, actually won a Grammy for this microphone technique, stereo, and you can one left and right. It's a very natural sounding stereo image. It really captures the room. I'm quite amazed how relatively nice this shed sounds. I'm attributing it a lot to the brick walls, and that the roof is kind of a bit atypical and quite light. So a lot of the big stuff will probably leave the shed. It won't actually stay and will go straight through the roof. It's probably why it's not sounding too bad. I mean, it's not Studio A301, that's for sure, but it's still got a cool rock, grungy sound. Now the kick snare drum, people that don't know much about recording are a bit unfamiliar with. It's not uncommon to put two mics on the snare, top and bottom, to capture the wire and the initial attack of the snare. Again, it's not as important to get right as it is the overheads, but still I am using a incredibly bright snare. It's got a bit of ring to it, so hence I tend to back off just to try and get a bit of the rim in there to control some of that ringing. And again, I try and get it in a relatively same axis, the top and the bottom, in polar opposites, because in post-production we'll flip them to avoid phase cancellation, which is a super nerdy thing. I won't get into it in this video, I don't think, because that might blow people's mind a little bit too much. But the bottom line is, mic placement is really important when recording a drum kit. In the kick drum, I don't know if you can get in there, Lee.
I'll try.
I'm doing something slightly different in the hole. I'm using two microphones. I usually do use two microphones on the kick. I usually do use the D6 as my A mic, and then my B mic, I usually use a Sennheiser E901, which is the plate mic that sits on the base of the kick. But it's at my parents' place, and I couldn't be asked going to get it. So I'm trying something a bit different. I'm using an Audix ADX51, which is a small diaphragm condenser instead. And the idea of having two mics, the condenser mic tends to capture more of the click and the attack of the kick drum, the high end, and with the big cardioid, the D6 captures the low end. And then just going on a couple more of the spot mics. For people that are completely bored and have tuned out yet, you've got the Audix E2, which is a super cardioid dynamic mic on the rack tom, pretty box standard. And then on the floor toms, I've been doing this for about 12 months now. I've switched to using kick drum microphones on floor toms, particularly larger floor toms. I quite like the response they get with the bottom end. They seem to articulate it a bit more, and I get a bit more resonance. And I just get a nice round sort of direct sound from them, as opposed to using a traditional instrument mic or a tom-tom mic. And that's the Beta 52.8. I quite like them. And the last one, and definitely is least, because it may well even just get muted, is a hi-hat mic. And I just use an Nascent 57. It's kind of the industry standard, chuck it on anything mic. Again, there's a few challenges in miking Dan's kit because of the way it's set up. It's got this rack around it, it's got cymbals kind of everywhere. It's been fun to kind of approach it, and that's just the key is it's coming away from the snare. You don't want much bleed from the snare, it'll drive you crazy. It's just to pull out the hi-hats in parts that need it. It probably will be muted for all, if not most of the track that it's there. As well, to bring up a little bit of hi-hats and post. So, hope you've enjoyed this informative and probably very boring discussion. Hopefully engaging for the recording enthusiasts and people that are sitting at home, bought out their brains on lockdown. Keep an eye out for this song. I won't tell you the name of the track yet. You'll see when it comes out. Dan's also shooting a bunch of drum covers. Check that out. We're doing that all here today. And we'll have a fair bit of fun doing it, aren't we, boys?
Absolutely.
Boys, good day, Beck. I know you're at work. We'll catch up with you soon, darling. Alright, that's Tinny out.